just imagine trying to keep a diary with 5 kids running around. I can barely keep track of my keys.
Uh-huh. I hear you.
So to think that she's got the time and the energy to be chronicling her life in such detail, it's incredible.
It really is.
So through Hazel's eyes, we're basically transported back to this world, a world completely different from ours.
Right.
Where survival depends on being self-sufficient and, living in tune with nature.
And you can really see that rhythm of life, that connection to the land woven throughout her writing.
Oh, totally.
Like take a typical Monday, for example, right?
Yeah.
No lattes or emails for Hazel.
Nope.
It's laundry day, churning butter, baking bread, tending to a massive garden. I mean, the list goes on and on.
And that's before lunch.
Exactly. It's a completely different world.
I know. She puts my daily to-do list to shame, that's for sure.
Uh-huh.
And it's not like she's just doing all of this for herself.
Right.
She's got, what did we say, 5 kids?
5 kids. Yeah, 5 little ones depending on her.
It just makes you realize how vital women were to life on the farm back then.
Absolutely. It wasn't just about being a homemaker. It was about contributing to the family's survival, being able to provide it.
Right. Like their livelihood literally depended on it.
Exactly. Self-sufficiency wasn't a hobby. It was a necessity.
And speaking of survival, one thing that really stood out to me was how much their lives revolved around the weather.
Oh, tell me about it.
I mean, I'm not talking about checking the weather app,
Right.
Blizzards, droughts, hailstorms. We're talking serious weather events, the kind that could make or break an entire year for them.
And, it's easy to forget that, especially with all the technology we have today.
Oh, I know. Like, imagine a world without, weather forecasts or modern farming equipment.
Right. It's hard to fathom.
Like, the elements held so much power back then.
Absolutely. It's a whole other level of respect for nature.
Totally. And it wasn't just an inconvenience.
Right. It was a matter of life or death in some cases.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's this one entry, I think it was early January, where she describes this awful blizzard.
Oh, wow.
And instead of just, hunkering down inside, she's out there with her husband, Alva, trying to protect their livestock.
There it is.
She even mentions falling and getting dragged by the wind.
Oh, my goodness.
And you can just feel the intensity of it in her writing.
It's incredible.
These weren't just chores. It was like a battle against nature.
Absolutely. It really speaks to their resilience, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, can you imagine?
I can't.
And to top it all off, this is all happening during the Great Depression.
Right.
I mean, talk about bad timing.
No kidding. Talk about a double whammy.
And it's not like she shies away from it in her diary.
Oh, no.
Like, the economic reality of that time, it's woven into almost every single entry.
It's inescapable.
Like, it's not just, oh, times are tough.
Right.
She gives these little details, almost like these little glimpses into how much they're struggling.
Oh, I know exactly what I mean.
Like, there's this one part where she mentions selling dozens of eggs.
Okay.
And a whole bunch of chickens.
Yeah.
And she gets, next to nothing for them.
Oh, wow.
What we would probably consider, spare change today. And it makes you stop and think,
It really does.
Like, their entire financial reality was just on a different level.
A completely different world.
Than what we're used to.
And it wasn't just about, cutting back a little.
Mm-hmm.
This was scarcity. I mean, real, genuine hardship.
And it makes you realize how resourceful people had to be back then, right?
Oh, absolutely. They had to make do with what they had, stretch every penny as far as it would go.
Totally. Like, she talks about patching clothes over and over.
Oh, yeah.
Until they were practically see-through instead of buying new ones.
Right.
And rationing food wasn't just something they did during wartime. It was just a part of life.
Absolutely. It was a way of life.
And it wasn't just Hazel,
right.
Her husband Alva. He was always looking for extra work.
Oh, I bet.
Anything to bring in, a few extra dollars.
And those jobs were tough, back-breaking labor, most likely.
Oh, I'm sure.
I remember one entry where he spent the entire night helping a neighbor pull his truck out of the mud.
Oh, wow.
For a couple of bucks.
Seriously.
Makes you really appreciate the value of a hard day's work, doesn't it?
It really does put things into perspective.
It does.
But what gets me? It's even with all this hardship, Hazel's diary, it's not all doom and gloom.
Right.
She still finds these moments of joy, moments of laughter, even in the middle of everything.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It's actually really inspiring.
It is. It speaks to the resilience of the human spirit.
Totally.
That no matter what life throws your way, there's always that ability to find hope, to find those moments of joy.
And it seems like family and community played a big role in that.
Right, absolutely. Those connections were essential, especially during those times.
Yeah, like her parents lived close by.
Okay.
And they were always helping out with the kids or, lending a hand on the farm.
Right, right.
And she talks about visits from relatives, church socials, just like simple gatherings with neighbors.
That sense of community, that support system that really makes a difference.
Yeah, you can tell how much it meant to her.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just about, practical support.
Right.
It was about emotional support, too. Having people to lean on, to share stories with, to laugh with,
Exactly. And you see that reflected in how she describes those simple pleasures.
Oh, totally.
Like celebrating birthdays with homemade gifts, having picnics by the creek, watching her garden bloom, like even just, laughing at her kids' silly antics.
It's finding joy in the everyday moments.
And those moments, they just take on this whole other meaning,
They do. They become even more precious.
Because it's like, even in the midst of everything else, she's finding reasons to smile.
Exactly. And it's a good reminder for all of us, isn't it?
Oh, totally.
That joy can be found even in the toughest of times, often in the simplest of things.
Like, there's this one entry, it's May 9th, their 9th wedding anniversary.
Aw.
And obviously they can't afford to go out for a fancy dinner or anything.
Right.
So they pack a picnic basket.
Okay.
And they go spend the afternoon by the creek with their kids.
I love it.
And as she's describing it, she mentions that they bumped into other families doing the exact same thing. How sweet.
And you can just feel the warmth and the joy in her words,
It's beautiful.
It really is.
And it's a good reminder that sometimes the simplest things in life are the most meaningful.
It's so true.
Like we get so caught up in, the hustle and bustle of everyday life, chasing after the next big thing.
Right, right.
That we forget to appreciate those small, quiet moments of connection and joy.
It makes you think about all the things we take for granted, too.
Oh, tell me about it.
Like, imagine a life without electricity.
I know, right?
Or where running water was a luxury.
Or having to plan a whole day trip just to go to town.
Exactly.
It's a completely different world.
And their definition of essential was just completely different from ours.
It had to be. It really makes you wonder, what would we find most surprising if we could go back in time? It'd be the pace of life for me, I think.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, like everything just seems so much slower back then.
Right.
More deliberate, Like she'll spend an entire day canning vegetables.
Yeah.
Or like meticulously mending clothes. Like,
right.
It's a far cry from our world of like instant gratification and just constant distractions.
It really is. It's like they had to be so present in each moment.
Yeah.
So connected to the natural rhythms of life.
And you're right. It's like resilience wasn't just some like trendy buzzword. It was a way of life.
Absolutely. It was woven into the fabric of their existence.
And it wasn't just about, enduring hardship. It was about like actively seeking out those glimmers of hope, those moments of connection.
Exactly. And holding on to them tight.
Yeah, exactly.
Because those moments, those little joys, they become even more important when you're surrounded by so much hardship.
Yeah. And it makes you realize, like, when we talk about the Depression, we tend to focus on like the economic devastation.
Which is understandable.
Right, of course.
But Hazel's diary, it reveals this whole other layer.
Yeah.
It's about the power of human connection, that strength that comes from community.
Totally.
And that's something that's often overlooked, I think.
It's so true.
Because even when everything else seems uncertain,
right,
human connection, that remains constant.
It's like, it's a testament to our resilience, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, both individually and as a society.
Like, we're capable of so much more than we think.
Oh, without a doubt.
And Hazel's story, it really highlights that, like, even in the face of extraordinary challenges,
right,
there's always something to be grateful for, always a reason to keep going.
I completely agree.
So as we kind of, like, close the pages on Hazel's diary,
yeah,
what do you think is, like, the most important takeaway from her story? Like, what do we want our listeners to remember?
I think for me, it's the importance of perspective.
Okay.
Like Hazel's diary, it's this window into a time and place so different from our own.
Right.
A time when life was, in many ways, much harder. But it also reminds us that even in those tough times, people found ways to connect, to find joy,
yeah,
to build resilience.
It's inspiring, really.